Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 251 based on novel. So let's start. Qin Mu straightened his back, and his gaze fell on Xing'an's body. He said indifferently, "I've been to Supreme Brightness Heaven before. It's in the sky above Supreme Emperor Heaven. There's a passageway there that could lead to the Great Ruins. Supreme Brightness Heaven and Supreme Emperor Heaven are also connected, so we can go over there from here. We can then move ourselves to the Great Ruins afterward, and no one will have to die." Xing'an said, "However, we will only slow ourselves down if we bring along these people. Furthermore, we gods will still have to protect them. In this doomsday world, we will only have our power exhausted even faster if we protect these divine arts practitioners. I suggest is we travel light." His gaze swept over everyone and he said, "Maybe we should kill a batch first and turn them into jerky. Then we can replenish our nutrients when we are hungry." Everyone felt their hair standing on ends, and they didn't dare look at him. Qin Mu said with a smile that was not quite a smile, "Xing'an, in my eyes, you are also a burden. If you don't want to become a burden, think like a normal human being. Help when you are required to help and just do your job. You aren't the leader of us all, so don't try to speak like a leader." Xing'an frowned. Village chief coughed and said calmly, "Xing'an, you should have a lot of jerky in your chest, right?" Blind stroke his divine spear long to and the black dragon was as soft as a cat. It slithered under his rough hands while giving off cracking sounds. It was very comfortable. Blind said with a smile, "Maybe we can turn old brother Xing'an into jerky and fill our stomach on the way." Cripple was full of courage this time and chuckled. "Let's chop off his 2 legs first." Xing'an said calmly, "Old sword god, your 4 limbs are gone now, and you aren't my match. Even if this Dao brother Pang Yu joins and all of you come after me at once, I'm not afraid." Apothecary asked curiously, "What are you saying? Say it once more." The corners of Xing'an's eyes twitched, and after a moment, he slowly said, "I'll do my part on the journey." Qin Mu looked at First Ancestor. His injuries were very heavy. He couldn't wake up right away, and since his body was heavy, he had to be carried by true god Pang Yu. The other divine arts practitioners could travel on the sea of lava, as stepping on lava wasn't difficult for them. The only thing the gods had to do was defend against the terrifying hurricanes and the lava waves for them. A hurricane that had a speed 100 times that of sound could easily blow away any divine arts practitioners. Poisonous gas and flaming rocks the size of mountains could easily injure them heavily or kill them. That was why the gods needed to guard the outer layer. Volcanoes would erupt underwater from time to time. That will be slightly difficult. Qin Mu muttered to himself. There were volcanoes everywhere under the sea of lava, and the eruptions of these volcanoes were equivalent to a strike from a god. He could only imagine what the outcome would be if the terrifying power hit the divine arts practitioners. "Sword god and I will deal with the volcanoes." Xing'an suddenly said, "His sword skills plus my divine arts will be enough to suppress the volcanoes." Qin Mu nodded his head and assigned everyone responsibilities. He said solemnly, "Gentlemen, Supreme Emperor Heaven is already destroyed. It's hard to part from your homeland, but living is more important. Maybe in the future, we can come back here again and quell the disaster. However, we must leave now." Sanghua knelt and kissed the ground, rubbing her face gently on the earth. The other divine arts practitioners also knelt to the ground, kissing and embracing it. The divine arts practitioners of eternal peace looked at them silently. The love for one's country was hard to experience during times of peace. Only during moments of calamity could one's love be invoked. After a moment, everyone stood up with gods guarded around them. Each of them executed great magic power to freeze natural disasters. Others stepped on the sea of lava that had become calm, trying their best to follow the people in front. The sea of lava was scorching, and the air was terrifyingly hot. Even with Rulai Ma's Buddha rays, it was hard to cool down the air. Seal all your pores and preserve the water in your body. Qin Mu shouted, those with flying divine arts, don't fly. Save some vital qi, as the journey is very long. Divine arts practitioners with higher realms, protect the junior brothers and sisters that are in a lower realm. He walked forward, and Cripple took out a compass. The compass was very ancient with many angles on it. It should be a treasure that Cripple had stolen from somewhere. He saw the needle on the compass spinning randomly, and it couldn't differentiate the direction at all. Cripple let out a sigh and kept the compass. He examined the surroundings, and the sea of lava was everywhere. The only thing that could dictate the direction was the Luofu heaven stabbed in the Supreme Emperor heaven. Tao Master Lin Xian and a bunch of old Taoists were trying to use stars to determine the direction when Daoist Cha suddenly said, there are no stars in Supreme Emperor heaven, so how are we going to determine the direction? Daoist Lin Xian and the other old Taoists were astonished and disappointed. The other people also wanted to determine the directions, but there were no stars in Supreme Emperor heaven. Furthermore, when both worlds' magnetic points collided, it messed up the magnetic field with abnormal points, making it impossible to differentiate which was the right one. There were also the dragon Qilin, the big deer, and numerous strange beasts that relied on the magnetic field to determine their location. However, now, these magnetic fields were making the beasts dizzy. Everyone need not worry about the direction. Qin Mu took out some Buddha Vitality Crimson Chromium and wood from Plume Buddha Mother Tree. He said to Rulai Ma with a smile, Old Ma, I need the most dexterous carpenter in the world. Rulai Ma revealed a smile and said, It's me. Qin Mu looked at Mute and said with a smile, Grandpa Mute, I need the most talented blacksmith as well. Mute grinned, and half a tongue grew out from his mouth. Ah? Qin Mu took out a paper and brush, doing calculation furiously, seeking accuracy. Not long later, he drew out a blueprint of a carriage and handed it to Old Ma and Mute. To forge this compass carriage, the digits must be accurate to the position of shrouded. Only then can we travel tens of thousands of miles without straying. Rulai Ma and Mute looked at the blueprints with grim faces, and after a moment Rulai Ma said, We can give it a try. The two of them started to get busy. They forged every component and after some time constructed the compass carriage. There was a golden man formed from Buddha Vitality Crimson Chromium on the carriage, raising an arm to point forward. On the head of the golden man were three small humans, each holding a wooden club. In their center was a drum. Qin Mu looked at Luofu heaven and determined the directions first. He adjusted the hands of the golden man, and called the dragon Qilin over to pull the carriage. They all saw that no matter how the dragon Qilin pulled the carriage, the hand of that golden man always pointed the same direction. Tao Master, I understand the logic of Cult Master Qin's compass carriage. It's relying on the rotation of mechanical bearing, gears, and wheels to make the golden man always point one direction. A young Daoist went forward to inquire with Tao Master. However, what are the three humans and the drum on top of the golden man for? Numerous divine arts practitioners turned their ears to listen. They had been learning algebra for 2 years, and many of them learned from the Taoists of Tao sect, so they were very curious about Qin Mu's compass carriage. Tao Master Lin Xian said, Those three small humans are used to calculate the mileage. Every 100 miles, the small humans should be moved by the gears and knock the drum once. As long as we calculate the number of drum beats, we will know the mileage. Everyone was astonished. Why do we have to calculate the mileage? Tao Master Lin Xian said, Cult Master Qin wanted Heavenly Worker and Rulai to be accurate to the shrouded position, but even so, there will still be a slight deviation. After the compass carriage travels 10,000 miles, the direction in which the finger of the golden man is pointing will have a slight deviation. I expect Cult Master Qin will adjust the direction of the golden man's hand to the right by one psi digit. Everyone was astonished and Yu He muttered, "Is there a need to be so precise?" "There is." Tao Master Lin Xian wore a warm expression. "If there's one psi of difference every 10,000 miles, there would be one hao of difference every 100,000 miles. We should be 100 miles away from where we are supposed to go, and a difference after 100 miles is not small." Cult Master Qin seeks perfection when he does things. When he wasn't familiar with seeing the original suns Supreme Emperor Heaven had, he smashed them and got Imperial preceptor to rebuild them. From that, we can see his character. He indeed smashed our sun on purpose. True God Pang Yu, who was carrying first ancestor human emperor on his back, thought to himself indignantly. When they walked about 100 miles or so, a small human on the top of the golden man's head struck down on the drum. Everyone cheered. "It's true." Tao Master Lin Xian said with a smile, "This is the charm of algebra. It might look useless, but it's everywhere. If anyone wants to learn even more in-depth algebra than taught at the schools in eternal peace, you can come to my Tao sect." Old monk Jingming took a glance at him and thought to himself, "Tao Master has learned bad things from Qin Mu, he's starting to lure people to join Tao sect. I need to tell Ru Lai, so we don't get our disciples stolen." As they traveled 10,000 miles, the small humans beat 100 times, and Qin Mu stopped. He opened the stomach of the golden man and adjusted the gears before continuing on their way. Everyone admired Tao Master Lin Xian even more. On the journey ahead, they walked 50 to 60,000 miles without any danger. They had already walked around Luofu Heaven. Even though Luofu Heaven was vast and stood upright in the center of Supreme Emperor Heaven, they couldn't see it. Layers of huge lava waves and black wind hid it from sight. Only Qin Mu's compass carriage could still determine the direction. Everyone was exhausted, and even the gods were starting to tire out. They were fine if they were just to protect themselves. The crux was that they still had to protect tens of thousands of divine arts practitioners. As a result, they were overly exhausted, and their vital qi was depleting continuously. Their stomachs were hungry, and their bodies gradually lost strength. Xing'an opened up his chest and took out some jerky to hand to Qin Mu. "You are the leader, and you shall hand them out." The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched, and he placed the jerky into his Dao Tai sack. "Village chief, Grandpa Butcher, come over here." He let the people of disabled elderly village surround Butcher, causing him to hesitate for a moment. He cut into the meat and said, "The children might not be able to stomach this kind of meat." Qin Mu said, "Dice them into small cubes. Everyone just needs a meat cube the size of a fingernail, gods can have slightly more." "Can Grandpa Butcher dice them into tens of thousands of portions?" "This is difficult. I'm afraid they won't eat." Butcher's knife skill was exquisite, and he quickly separated the jerky evenly. Qin Mu placed them onto a plate. A plate of diced meat was terrifyingly heavy. They shone with various colors, and even with his remarkable strength, he found it hard to lift them. Some of the diced meat even contained incomparably thick devil qi. Those who cultivate the God path can take diced meat that is giving off God rays, and everyone can have a small piece. Those who cultivate the devil path can take diced meat that is giving off devil rays, don't take more. He gave out the dried meats. Xu Xinghua hesitated for a moment, and took 2 cubes, giving one to Jing Yang. Jing Yang was slightly hesitant and asked with a low voice, "Cult Master, what meat is this?" "Not human meat." Qin Mu hesitated and whispered back, "But it isn't any good either. Numerous arms and legs are hanging in Xing'an's chest. There are even heads." This is the flesh of gods that don't belong to the human race, and there isn't much of it. After he had handed out the diced meat, Apothecary summoned him again. The two of them hurried to and fro, making spirit pills continuously. Granny Sai used creation divine arts to grow spirit herbs, and created cauldrons of spirit pills for the gods and divine arts practitioners to recover. Even so, they had nothing to eat. Spirit pills alone weren't enough to fill their stomach or quench their thirst. Can creation divine arts create water? Someone asked with a low voice. Someone replied, stop talking and wasting the water in your body. Qin Mu flipped through his Daotai sack and took out his remaining water to give everyone, but they could only get a few drops. He prepared for an emergency under normal circumstances, but he didn't have too much water in his Daotai sack. The corporeal body of divine arts practitioners was strong, and one could still live for quite a time even when dehydrated. He just needed to let everyone maintain a certain level of moisture in their body and survive until they reach supreme brightness heaven. The water created by creation divine art is trying to change the most basic structure of a substance. This requires heaven-defying knowledge in creation divine arts. The one who probably has this level of attainment is first ancestor human emperor, but he is severely injured. Qin Mu pouted his dry lips and looked in front. Everyone, including the gods, was dehydrated. Only the dragon Qin pulling the carriage was still full of vigor, running ahead with light footsteps. Even his nemesis the big deer had depleted energy levels, becoming so skinny that only bones were left. Only the dragon Qin was full of energy. He could control fire naturally, so he was literally in his natural habitat. Even the high heat was like taking a hot bath to him. Without water, we probably won't reach supreme brightness heaven. Qin Mu's throat was steaming, and he swallowed his saliva with difficulty. However, he had no more saliva, so there was only dry rubbing sound. 5 elements composed the divine arts in the world, but water attribute divine arts used the water vapor roaming in the surroundings to combine with their water vital qi, creating an apparition of water flooding everywhere. They weren't truly water, and when the vital qi dispersed, water vapor would quickly scatter away. Using creation divine arts to change the basic structure of a substance required extremely high attainments. It meant creating something from nothing. Such abilities were something they couldn't achieve. They walked forward with difficulty, and nobody still had spirit beneath the scorching heat. They could only rely on their willpower to drag their tired bodies forward. First ancestor human emperor had already woken up, but his injuries were still very heavy. He needed true god Pang Yu to carry him, and Qin Mu could only hope Apothecary could help him. Only then could first ancestor execute the methods of creation to create water from nothing. Suddenly, a light came from the sky, and the gods that were defending against the impact looked up to see an unscrolled life and death book flying over quickly. The book shone with a bright light over the sea of lava. The life and death book was bright like a mirror and showed names which moved quickly. Life and death book. Qin Mu was astonished. The thing flying in the sky was a life and death book, or to be exact, it was the life and death book that was in the hands of Lu Yunxiu and the rest. Lu Yunxiu relied on the power of the life and death book to invade the sacrificial altars of Luofu heaven, sacrificing it to cause the two worlds to collide. The life and death book has appeared again, shining at the sea of lava in Supreme Emperor heaven. What were they going to do? If it's to seize me, he doesn't need to activate the life and death book. In that case, he must be trying to capture all of us in one go. When Qin Mu looked around, he could only see tired soldiers. The people couldn't fight at all, and even the gods were completely exhausted. Supreme Emperor Heaven is being destroyed and has a horrible environment. Lu Yunxiu should only be able to awaken some god skeletons. Luckily, there aren't too many. The moment he thought to that point, huge god skeletons suddenly rose from the sea of lava. The bones were still flowing within the lava. The lava and flames on the skeletons extinguished, and their skulls were empty, leaving nothing but ghostly flames floating in their eye sockets. More and more god skeletons rose from the sea of lava. 1, 2, 10, 100, the number kept increasing. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. He wanted to say something, but his voice was hoarse. True God Pang Yu, can you guys still fight? True God Pang Yu, God Sang Yi and the rest had withered complexions. Their lips were dry, causing blood to flow out from cracked places. The people from disabled elderly village weren't doing well either. To protect the tens of thousands of people, they had been dealing with disasters from all directions, and they were exhausted. Qin Mu looked at Xing'an, who was currently opening his chest and taking out several arms and legs. He replaced his legs and arms with new ones. He changed his body, taking out some god's blood to replace his own. I can fight. After Xing'an changed his blood, he said indifferently, there are too many god skeletons, so I can't protect you guys for too long. The body parts in my chest are limited. Also, I have a term. He looked at Apothecary and said solemnly, have Jade Face Poison King completely solve the hidden symptoms in my body. If you guys don't agree, I will turn and leave. Apothecary frowned. If I don't agree, where else can you go? You can't leave Supreme Emperor Heaven, and you can't go back to eternal peace. Qin Mu sighed and said, he can leave. The compass carriage has already pointed out the way to Supreme Brightness Heaven for him. Xing'an is intelligent, so he would definitely realize that. Xing'an revealed a smile. Only I can save you guys now. In that case, Poison King, will you agree to my terms? All right. Apothecary spoke without hesitation. I will write down the prescription for you, but you have to fight until you die. Xing'an shook his head. I can't. If my life is in any danger, I will leave immediately and not sacrifice myself here. Apothecary sneered. If you aren't fighting to your death, what's the point of having you? Xing'an's eyes lit up and the skeletons of the gods seemed to have received orders, rushing over. Xing'an immediately left, but his voice sounded out from a distance. The time where you guys have to beg me will come. He flew away and abandoned everyone. Butcher pulled out his knife and shouted loudly, fight to the death. Knife light rushed into the sky, and the other gods also took out their divine weapons. They gritted their teeth and stared at the god skeletons that were rushing over. Even though they were already exhausted, the lives of tens of thousands of divine arts practitioners laid in their hands. They had put aside the rights to decide their life and death. More and more god skeletons appeared and drew closer and closer. The massive skeletons were stepping on the sea of lava, running so fast it looked as though they were flying. Their footsteps raised astonishing waves, and the atmosphere was terrifying. God Sang Yi suddenly said with a smile, Senior Brother Pang Yu, if these young fellows could survive, there would be many among them that could cultivate to the level of God, am I right? True God Pang Yu was carrying First Ancestor on his back, and he smiled. That is natural. These bunch of youngsters is much smarter than us, and they also have a lot of abilities. Those that can cultivate to gods would be no inferior to our ancestors, and they might even reach a height we couldn't. The gods smiled and said, in that case, if we fight to the death for them, it's worth it. Grandpa Butcher laughed loudly and shouted, Village Chief, Granny, you guys shall send them off first. I will cover the back and cut them off. Are both of you confident in facing the danger ahead? Granny Sai became solemn and said firmly, until death puts an end. Okay. The gods shouted as they rushed towards the god skeletons with world-shaking roars. Village Chief sighed and solemnly said, let us go. I shall use all of my cultivation to open up a path for you guys. Just as his words fell in their ears, the sea of lava suddenly boiled as huge gas bubbles welled up. Village chief was astonished, and his vital chi transformed into his 4 limbs. Pressing down on his sword, he stared at the sudden transformation from the sea of lava. Whoosh! Lava rushed into the sky and a huge bone dragon clad in worn-out armor rushed out. Behind the bone dragon, armor-clad god skeletons were sprinting furiously. There were close to 1,000 of them leaping out from the sea. Village chief's expression turned pale white, and the vital chi palm that was holding his sword started to tremble. On the forehead of that huge bone dragon, a god skeleton that wore a worn-out cape stood with a worn-out battle axe in his hand. Swinging his battle axe, he laughed loudly and ordered, "Soldiers of Southern Heaven's Southern Dipper Division, raise these monsters down for me." Whoosh! Countless god skeletons jumped over village chief and the rest and moved towards the skeletons that Butcher, Pang Yu and the others were fighting. Village chief had a dazed look as he turned his head back to see the skeleton army fighting with the skeleton army. Instantly, shattered bones began flying in random directions. The skeletons that had rushed past them seemed to be a well-trained troop. The formation they laid out allowed them to rush ahead, as though they were slicing melon, crushing the opponent's army into nothingness. Everyone was astonished by this sudden change of events. Village chief turned his head back, and suddenly saw that bone dragon lowering its head. The skeleton general on the skull put down his battle axe and bowed. Founding Emperor Celestial Heavens, Southern Heaven Southern Dipper Division, Supreme Emperor Heaven Provincial Governor, Wei Liao, pay my respects to Benefactor. It's rare to meet Benefactor again, and I didn't expect it to be under such a circumstance. Even though he was only a skeleton, he had an extraordinary presence and heroic spirit. Just by hearing his voice, one could imagine he was an awe-inspiring god general during his lifetime. The tens of thousands of people were at a loss, and they didn't know what to do. Suddenly, they heard a voice from the crowd. "Provincial Governor Wei Liao is too courteous. Please rise." Everyone looked towards the source of the voice, and they saw Qin Mu walking out from the crowd. This young cult master bowed slightly and raised his hands. Qin Mu said with a smile, "I didn't expect we would reunite here. Is this place the ominous land?" "This is indeed the ominous land. However, this place has also become a sea of lava. The ominous land no longer exists. We had planned to guard the ominous land and sank into the sea of lava. Only, were we awakened by the life and death book, and new benefactor was in danger, therefore we have come to lend our assistance." Wei Liao's gaze moved past them, and he looked at the battlefield with a smile. "Mere filthy scum can't do anything to my Southern Heaven Southern Dipper army. Benefactor, don't worry, we just need a moment, and we will be able to break through." Qin Mu said to village chief, "This is 7 kills Star Sovereign of Founding Emperor era, the provincial governor of Supreme Emperor Heaven. He died here when the devils invaded." Village chief nodded his head gently, and seemed to be a little numb. "Provincial Governor of Supreme Emperor Heaven, and also 7 kills Star Sovereign. How did you guys meet?" Qin Mu scratched his head and said, "I got caught by Fu Riluo, and when I escaped, I passed by this place and woke him up. Then we became acquaintances." "Just like that?" Village chief cried out in astonishment, with his eyes wide open. The provincial governor of Supreme Emperor Heaven who had died in battle was still the provincial governor, after all, but he became acquaintances with him just like this. Furthermore, he even risked his life to save them when he saw Qin Mu in danger. Would a simple acquaintance have such deep friendship? Village chief was skeptical. Qin Mu said honestly, "Just like that. In that case, this army of god skeletons. I woke them up after waking him up." Village chief was stunned. "Just like that?" Qin Mu replied briefly, "Just like that. However, Yudu's messenger of death almost took me into Yudu to be sentenced for my crimes. Luckily, Star Sovereign Wei Liao stopped him. Village Chief let out a sigh and said bleakly, I shouldn't have spent such a long time in Fengdu. I missed so many interesting events. Next time, there are such interesting things, remember to call me. Qin Mu nodded his head. The next time I get captured, I will definitely bring Grandpa Village Chief. Wei Liao's skeleton army quickly shattered all of the enemies, and a bunch of skeletons rushed over in excitement. Wei Liao shouted, and the skeletons didn't dare be reckless. They hurriedly got into their ranks. Butcher, True God Pang Yu and the rest of the gods walked over. They were muddle-headed and bewildered as they examined the white skeletons. Lu Yinxiu had summoned the dead gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven to fight for him, but he never expected Qin Mu to have such a white skeleton army to help him. If it weren't for Wei Liao, who hurried over just in time with his Southern Dipper army, they would probably have casualties. However, standing together with the skeleton gods made them feel nervous. Wei Liao laughed and said, even though this doomsday is dangerous to you guys, it isn't dangerous to the dead at all. Benefactor, let us escort you out. Qin Mu hurriedly said, my enemy possesses the life and death book, and it can revive the dead. It's very powerful. Since it can revive the dead, it can also turn the living back to the dead. It's best for everyone to continue hiding in the ominous land. As he was saying, the life and death book suddenly appeared again, and the mirror-like paper shone brightly. Beams of light shone down on them. Qin Mu's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly took out a few mirrors. He poured his vital qi into the mirrors, and they grew larger, before flying above the heads of Wei Liao and the rest to block the light. Grandpa Apothecary, where are your mirrors? Qin Mu shouted, everyone, activate your mirror and block the light of the life and death book. Apothecary hurriedly mobilized dozens of mirrors, and the other divine arts practitioners also came to a realization. Instantly, there were over 10,000 mirrors of all sizes floating in the sky. They completely sealed the sky, allowing no light to penetrate through. The light from the light and death book scattered down, and was reflected by the mirrors, preventing the light from shining on Wei Liao and the rest. 40% of the tens of thousands of divine art practitioners were female, and even though they were cultivators, they still wished to appear beautiful. They would usually have 1 or 2 mirrors, though the one with the most mirrors was still Apothecary. Some divine arts practitioners cultivated unique spells. Therefore, they used mirrors as spirit weapons. After being refined into a spirit weapon, the mirror could expand to have an area of several hectares, and that was a magnificent sight. Qin Mu saw that the light from the life and death book couldn't land, but he still didn't dare to relax. The flying speed of the life and death book is extremely fast. It's impossible for us to change accordingly to the situation. As long as the life and death book moves quickly, it can still shine onto you guys. Provincial Governor, it's best for you guys to hide. Wei Liao grabbed his battle axe and said solemnly, the life and death book can shine all the way into the Yellow Springs, where can we hide? Hee, what's more, those fellows of Mingju are the nemesis of our Southern Heaven's Southern Dipper. We have already died once, so what's the problem in dying once more? Qin Mu frowned and said, Provincial Governor Wei Liao, if Lu Yinxiu sends you guys to Yudu, I still have a way to drag you guys back. However, if he sends you to Mingju, I won't have the ability to do so. Where there's life there's hope, please think thrice. At this moment, everyone saw the light changing rapidly, and it was evident that the life and death book was moving at high speeds. It was likely that Lu Yinxiu and the rest changed their direction, because they saw the power of the life and death book getting reflected by the mirrors. There's nowhere for us to retreat, so why retreat? Wei Liao was about to rush out of the protection of the mirrors when a familiar voice suddenly rang out. Provincial Governor doesn't have to sacrifice needlessly. Cult Master Qin, don't you have a life and death book? If you execute your life and death book, can't you counter the power of the opponent's life and death book? Qin Mu was delighted and turned around to see Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walking towards him. He was as easygoing as usual and looked like he was planning strategies. Junior brother has come out from seclusion. You didn't die in Luofu heaven. Qin Mu's flustered heart calmed when he saw him. He hurriedly took out his life and death book and asked, "Where's teacher? Why didn't he appear with you?" If teacher was here, he could execute the power of this life and death book. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took the life and death book, while saying indifferently, "Teacher still has some other matters to attend to. However, I know how to execute a life and death book." His magic power burst forth, and the life and death book unfurled. A bright light screen shone on Wei Liao and the rest of skeleton gods from above. Junior brother can remove the mirrors now. Qin Mu was anxious and doubtful, but he still let everyone take down their mirrors. He saw another life and death book flying over, and there was light shining down. However, Wei Liao and the rest were safe. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had executed the power of the life and death book, blocking off the power of the opponent's life and death book. The life and death book was a treasure that was made by Mingju's black deity. Even Qin Mu couldn't execute much of its power, and if he wanted to do so, he would need a deep understanding of Mingju's techniques and divine arts. Qin Mu had never learned the divine arts and techniques of Mingju, which was why he couldn't do anything. When had Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor learned the techniques and divine arts of Mingju? Teacher's knowledge is profound, and he knows how to control the book. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said calmly, "I have learned all kinds of knowledge following him to cultivate for 2 years. I comprehended 100 from comprehending 1, and mastered 100 by mastering 1. Controlling the life and death book isn't hard." In the sky, a huge hand suddenly appeared and grabbed at the life and death book. The palm swayed, and darkness was born, enveloping the life and death book. It was as if the book had entered another dimension and gone into another time and space. Qin Mu was astonished. Lu Yinxiu has made their moves. They want to snatch away the life and death book. Swoosh! Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stabbed out, and the bright sword light pierced into the darkness. Qin Mu was about to say something, when he saw the bright sword light penetrate the hand in the darkness. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword light instantly severed several fingers. The huge hand grabbed at the life and death book, but it had no more fingers, so it missed. It could only move back in pain. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor returned his sword into its sheath, and it seemed like he hadn't done anything. He continued to say, "If you see through the spells of Yudu, you will be able to see through the spells of Mingju and the spells of Fengju. All spells have their fundamental theory, and the fundamental theory is the so-called Tao. Once you understand the Tao within and look at the life and death book again, everything will become clear. It won't be as hard to execute." Qin Mu's heart was endlessly astonished. It was impossible for the Sword of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor to stab the palm hiding in Mingju. Mingju shrouded the darkness devil chi that the palm gave off. When Qin Mu and Lu Yinxiu's junior brother fought, he discovered the strangeness of the spell from Mingju. Lu Qianzhong defeated Xu Xinghua that way. Qin Mu had only slain Lu Qianzhong, because he was born in Yudu, and could enter the Mingju space formed by Lu Qianzhong's devil chi. The sword from Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wasn't a spell of Yudu, but it could stab the palm. It seemed what he said was true, and he already understood the Tao within. The spells of Mingju were no longer a secret to him. Your comprehension rose to such a step in just 2 years. Qin Mu looked at him in admiration and muttered, "How knowledgeable must teacher be to let you improve so fast?" Village chief floated forward and said solemnly, "Imperial Preceptor, the attainments in your sword skills have already surpassed mine." Imperial Preceptor greeted, you flatter me. Senior brother. Village chief's vital qi transformed into 4 limbs, and he returned the greeting, senior brother. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked forward with astonishment on his face, which gradually transformed into a smile that grew wider and wider. It finally became a refreshed and hearty laugh that was like the spring season. Village chief also laughed loudly. The laughter of the 2 sword gods reverberated in the doomsday, traveling up to the 9 heavens. High up in the air, Fu Yanqi's face was black, and he pulled back his blooded hand. From his 5 fingers, he only had a thumb left. It wasn't Lu Yunxiu who was controlling the life and death book just now, but him. The 3 of them each received a portion of Black Deity's teachings. Lu Yunxiu could activate the life and death book to revive the dead. Even if Earth Count took their souls, he could seize them back by force with the life and death book. On the other hand, Kuei Qingpei could control the blood sacrifice power of the life and death book, dissolving the corporeal body and primordial spirit of the gods directly. As for Fu Yanqi, he could control the life and death book to exhaust the life of the living, sending them into Mingju. However, he had met Imperial Preceptor, who negated his power completely. Therefore he had planned to seize Qin Mu's life and death book. He never expected his divine art to be broken and lose 4 fingers in the end. On the other side, Lu Yunxiu hurriedly grasped the life and death book of Mingju, shining it at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. His heart trembled slightly and he said with a low voice, "The leader of Eternal Peace's reform has finally appeared." Fu Yanqi endured the pain and looked at the life and death book, only to see one name that had appeared. This video will end here.